and we'll focus on some of the new RFS regulations, including QAP and new RFS to Pathways 2 provisions, and then we'll also be presenting some very interesting market information on tracking ethanol trends, including production and some other information along the ethanol activity chain. So I'm Susan Olson, and I'm the VP of Biofuels here at Genscape, and I'd like to introduce my distinguished colleague Stefan Mueller, who is he's the Senior Director of Product Development for Agriculture, and also contributes to the Biofuels product lines here at Genscape. So, Stefan, it's good to be together on this webinar. How are you doing today?
Great. Thanks, Susan, and thanks everybody for joining us. We hope we have some interesting information here for you today.
Good deal. So I'm in Louisville, and Stefan is in Chicago right now. So we wanted to please submit your questions. We always love to. I think it's very enriching for these webinars to be able to get your questions as we go through here. So just use the box on the right-hand side of the dashboard for GoToWebinar. We'll treat all questions anonymously, and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. If we don't get to all the questions, then we'll follow up with Q&A or one-on-one answers to the questions after the webinar today. So I'd just like to spend a couple of minutes literally talking about the Genscape and what we do for biofuels. Specifically for today's audience, I wanted to focus on the information that we provide for the ethanol supply chain. So we basically provide information solutions and also compliance services across the ethanol activity chain as shown here at the diagram at right. So basically what we try to do is to provide information to bring more market transparency to these different areas of activities surrounding the ethanol activities, and basically from inputs such as fertilizer production all the way to import-export and also environmental credit generation. And you can see here that we are either working on or have an existing product available in each of these areas. So we're doing a lot of expansion between now and the end of 2015, and we look forward to being able to bring more transparency to the market as time goes on. In really kind of focusing on some of the things that we're discussing today, one of the things that we're doing at Genscape and the biofuels is that we are trying to help streamline environmental credit assurance with remote monitoring and also with streamlining site visits to do multiple things at a facility. So as many of you know, we provide quality assurance plans for RFS2. This is better known as QAP across the industry. We provide QAP for all fuel types, and we've been doing this across 4 continents now for about 3 years. So we've been in the QAP business since the program's inception. Actually, when I say 3 years, actually I mean we were doing some commercial activities in this business well before the inception of QAP, and helped shape the development of the commercial QAP program as it's known today. We also provide LCFS integrity and other credit assurance services. In doing so, we've developed quite a bit of depth in the regulations and also renewable fuels technology. In addition, we work with several preferred business associates. I'd just like to mention those. I think it's worthwhile because these businesses offer extensions to our core compliance and market information and offer a lot of help and services to our clients. So we work with Christensen & Associates, who performs attestations for a lot of our QAP clients. As many of you know, they're a very well-recognized CPA firm with a wide array of financial and auditing services, and they've done a lot of service in the ethanol and grains markets. So we also work with Lee Enterprises Consulting, which is the largest renewables consulting group in the world. They have engineering services and many other services, safety services, grant writing services, a whole bevy of things for renewable fuel producers. We also work with Murex LLC, that's a marketer of fuels, crude, chemical, ethanol, and also RINs with transportation and export capabilities, and they're located in Texas. And we also work with Progressive Fuels Limited. Our clients have worked with them if they're looking to broker RINs. So these experts, again, help supplement Genscape's compliance and market expertise and offer a lot of help with our clients. So
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We just wanted to make sure you're still on the title slide, and a few people were asking if you had advanced them. Just wanted to make sure.
It should say, is it advancing now?
No.
Okay, thanks for letting me know. How about now?
Yes. Yep, perfect.
Okay, thank you so much for letting me know. Appreciate that.
No problem.
Sorry about that, folks. Thanks for letting me know, Jamie, about that. So basically, just I'll flip back through here as I'm finishing just the discussing of what we're going to do today. This is the ethanol supply chain information that we have. So today, I wanted to introduce a little bit about who we are in the beginning, but this is not going to be an advertisement on Genscape services. So what we're doing today, Stefan and I wanted to kind of put together a substantive presentation for the ethanol community. What we do is in what we do, we get a lot of exposure to what's going on in current regulations and also things that impact the ethanol market. So we really wanted to share that with the industry community today. And certainly hope that what we present today will create some value for those that are on the call today. So in addition to the credit assurance that we do, and the other thing that I wanted to mention is that we do, on the transparency side, which will be kind of the second half of today's presentation, we do provide supply chain fundamentals with our Genscape land viewer services, our ethanol inventory report, and ethanol production monitor. And those kind of things form the foundation of what we'll talk about on the supply side and the state of the market today. So I wanted to give you a quick overview. So we'll talk about QAP for ethanol today. Specifically, we'll focus on the advantages and trends, updates to EMTS, which has been a hot topic around the industry, and then implementation details. And then we'll talk about ethanol supply statistics and trends and the cellulosic outlook. Stefan's going to give a really, a very interesting update and very timely update on the 2014 corn growing season. And then we'll finish off, we have several tools that are available both publicly and also via subscription that can help the industry keep tracking on these supply chain matters. So without further ado, let's get into talking about QAP for ethanol. So we've covered a lot of regulatory details on QAP in previous webinars. So rather than kind of repeat that material, what we decided to do was to stick to a condensed version of that today and focus on more of implementation and preparation for ethanol plants, and then also talk about the changes that are happening to EMTS. So these webinars, if you're interested, are located on the genscape.com website for free download, or just contact me and I'll make sure that you get what you need on those. But just wanted to start out today on this condensed version, talk about the regulatory timeline. I think most people on the call are most likely aware that kind of what started the awareness of a need for more integrity for the RINs was the occurrence of advanced biofuel RIN fraud that came to light in late 2011. We then began launching a commercial RIN assurance service in 2012. The EPA started to meet with Congress and then actually issued a proposed rule on quality assurance plans, which was a formalization of RIN integrity that offered benefits, proposed benefits such as an affirmative defense for those that had the QAP RINs. Then that actually became published as a final rule in the Federal Register on July 18, 2014, and became effective on the 16th of September here just recently. So since then, there's been a lot of provisions for QAP providers to establish their QAP companies and to start beginning to go through the official registration process to become QRIN certified. So another thing to kind of set the stage for this, that's the timeline of what happened regulatorily with QAP. So what kind of benefits does QAP bring? Because I think it's always important to set the stage for, kind of why we're talking about this. The benefits of QAP, first and foremost, there are no violations for transfer or retirement of invalid RINs with assertion of affirmative defense. So QAP is actually a requirement for asserting this affirmative defense for 2013 RINs and beyond. And there are three types of qualified RINs. There are A RINs, B RINs, and what will be Q RINs here very shortly that qualify for the affirmative defense. This also, with this QAP designation and the avoidance of a notice of violation, stiff penalties can be avoided. So remedial actions, up to $37,500 per day per violation that's stipulated in the Clean Air Act as a maximum type of violation. One example settlement for 4 million invalid RINs in these advanced biofuel RIN fraud cases for 4 million RINs was $350,000 in 2012. That was prior to the QAP program. And And also, that did not include the replacement value that had to be exercised to replace the RINs. So again, this helps avoid costly penalties. One thing to point out is that a lot of people think of QAP benefits and they think that this benefit is just going to the RIN buyer or the person that's going to retire their RINs or the party that's going to retire the RINs. But I think it's important to point out that this affirmative defense also indirectly helps RIN generators. And I think also having a QAP provider can help RIN generators prevent situations where a regulatory mistake or oversight, or just a miss may create some downstream friction with RIN buyers, or even some worsening conditions that would involve some economic or business relationship damage. So having a QAP provider is like having an extension of your facility's existing compliance team, having an expert on hand, pretty much all the time and watching your back. So perhaps not as tangible, let's say, as an affirmative defense, but I think that there certainly are benefits to having a QAP provider in your back pocket. So the other thing is that it helps improve market liquidity of RINs. So whereas before there were different, basically lists depending on what type of QAP provider, was used by a particular fuel provider, I think that this QAP program is basically helping to streamline that so that it's either a non-verified RIN or soon to be what will be a Q RIN, and those will basically create categories of RINs rather than having, individual type of acceptance of different integrity measures. And then again, another thing that I think the QAP does is, I talked to a lot of facilities that would have multiple audits every year where an auditor would represent a different counterparty. So you might have 5 audits or maybe even more audits every year because every counterparty had a different standard. And I think that what this is starting to do is standardize that protocol, so it helps save cost and time for facilities, whereas they would have to go through multiple audits and try to kind of avoid this audit fatigue that happens from time to time. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the trends in QAP, again on the motivation side. So I think that the finalization of the rule on QAP has from a QAP provider outlook, has definitely increased the number of companies across fuel types that are adopting QAP. On the right is just a very simple bubble chart showing the different types of fuel types that Genscape clients belong to, and we're definitely seeing a very large diversification across these fuel types. We've seen our client base double since the passage of the final rule on QAP. We've also seen requests for proposal rapidly emerge from the ethanol industry for both corn and sugar-based ethanol, and then also, of course, cellulosic ethanol. We're also seeing an increase in foreign QAP proposals. So, what we've been observing, just generally speaking, and is that basically companies tend to be targeting the QRIN compliance by the end of the calendar year, so that they can start QRIN generation fresh for the 2015 compliance year. Right now, based on what our agency discussions, the EPA is still reviewing plans for QRIN authorization. We'll talk a little bit more about details with the QRIN authorization, here in just a moment. We talk about EMTS. Okay, so A-RINs, B-RINs, and Q-RINs. Trying to make a little bit of condensed sense out of this and take a look at these regulatory changes in a condensed fashion. So what I'll tend to do is just kind of walk through these bullets and then basically come back to the diagram at the top to kind of cap this off. So beginning in January 1st, 2013, the proposed rule actually came out in February 21st, 2013 on QAP, and established, going back to January 1st, an A-RIN and B-RIN program that would extend until the effective date of the final rule. And so basically those A-RIN and B-RIN plans became formally approved by the EPA in September 2014 once that rule was finalized. So they are valid for asserting an affirmative defense, and they may be generated and continue to be generated through December 31st, 2014. In the meantime, the EPA, since the final rule, which was September 16th, they've now issued EMTS version 3.2 and the OTAC registration and QRIN application process for QAP providers, and that was last week. So the new EMTS version, as I'm sure many of you are aware of right now that interact with the system, the new EMTS version does now have the capabilities for QRIN flagging. but formal approval and QREN company association process hasn't begun to happen yet, and it's still pending for all service providers, again, based on our recent conversations with the agency. So, so you won't be able to designate or have QRENs designated on your behalf in EMTS until the EPA completes the approval process for your QAP provider. So basically kind of looking at the diagram above, so January 1st, 2013, that's when the ARIN and BRIN programs became effective. Now that the EMTS version 3.2 is in place, it has the QREN capability. But again, the QREN flag won't be available until an associated QAP provider is approved by the EPA. So between now and basically January 1st, 2015, there's a possibility for ARINs, BRINs, and QRENs all to coexist. But what should happen with your QAP provider is as soon as that they are approved for QRENs, things should transition over to those QRENs, and they must do so by the beginning of next year. So after January 1st, 2015, only QRENs will exist. So in the meantime, we actually have tools for REN holders and obligated parties to validate ARINs and BRINs. We provide certificates. We also have a biofuels dashboard where anyone can basically go onto the dashboard and look and see what the verification status is of a particular provider. And actually, you have to have a registration, and then the REN buyers then can see the status of any individual producer, and also details such as facility profile and facility update. So going back to the technicalities of EMTS for a minute, and I'll focus here on this pink dashed box, because this is the part that I wanted to talk about in terms of producer association. All the part on the left-hand side outside of the box is what a QAP provider needs to do to become an active QAP provider for the EPA. So, but once that happens, and the QAP provider is approved, which again, the EPA is still in the process of working through that, the QAP provider will then initiate a request between itself and the fuel producer. Then you as a fuel producer, if you're a fuel producer, would accept that association for the specific pathways that you're having QAP'd. And then once you do that, then your QRENs will be active and for those particular pathways. And then you can transact QRENs and EMTS. So again, just to recap, the request is initiated by the QAP provider. The fuel producer then needs to accept it, and then QREN generation will be able to begin. The EPA has actually updated its website on QAP. One of the things I wanted to make REN generators aware of today is that if you intend to participate in QAP, this little two-pager they have on the website is worth a read. So it's called an instruction document for renewable fuel producers that intend to participate in QAP. And just to give you the brief rundown, there's some requirements that the RCO has to meet. Some of these are pretty much, I think, straightforward and things that you would typically do anyway. The RCO is the responsible corporate officer for the company. But one of the things that you need to have is you need to have your electronic signature agreement, an ESA, on file with the EPA, either a signed paper copy or an electronically signed ESA using the acceptable methods from the EPA. So take a look at this. This is just things that technically have to happen before you're able to electronically approve the QAP Provider Association request. And if you have any questions about this, by all means, reach out to myself. We've answered several questions about this and would be happy to help walk you through it. Most of the EMTS changes were made to accommodate QAP. You'll see some schema changes and report changes. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but basically the report changes, just to highlight the QAP service type, the QAP provider name, and then also the QAP provider identifier. And like I said, one of the things I wanted to make sure that you come away with is that the EMTS verification part for the RENs is only for QRENs. So ARINs and BRINs will never be listed in EMTS. So only QRENs will be associated in there. So right now, currently, you'll have either unverified status or QREN. And until you're associated with a QAP provider, you'll continue to show these as unverified. Even if you're getting ARINs and BRINs verified by a QAP provider, in EMTS, your status will be shown as unverified until you are associated with a QAP provider and then have the QRENs. Okay, so now that we've kind of got that technical piece through and kind of where we are, wanted to just briefly go through what to expect. So kind of preparing for QAP, what to expect as a RIN generator. So kind of the basic steps that we see as people go through this process is that, first of all, they qualify and select a QAP provider. There's a bar that QAP providers have to meet before they're accepted by the EPA. We provided those details in one of our previous webinars, which is linked here if you want to take a look at those. The other thing we always recommend, and we see RIN generators and producers do, is that they should talk to their counterparties about what the expectations are on QAP, both from whether should I have it or not to how does the cost transference work, and working out all those details, and also what their expectations are on QAP service provider qualifications. Do they expect service provider to have remote monitoring? Are there any special expectations that need to be met? We just talked about the updates to the CDX registration. Just make sure that those things are up to date, and those are outlined in the document that's been created by the EPA. And then basically the next steps are, once you sign up with a QAP provider, you want to assemble the baseline documentation and then start including the quarterly data reporting in your workflow. This is a basic overview of how QAP works. Basically, there are two pieces. The green box on the left-hand side represents the baseline piece of the QAP, and then the other blue boxes represent the ongoing pieces of QAP. And that's kind of how we tend to look at it. There's a baseline piece to get you across the goal line, and then an ongoing piece where you're continuing to do what's required to stay QAP compliant. The baseline piece involves a documentation audit and a site visit, and then the ongoing piece involves provided by client data, so there will be some sample documentation and also some information that's passed. In the Genscape system, we provide independent monitoring, and in both of those things, the data that comes from an existing implant sensing network can be integrated into the QAP process to try to eliminate any redundancy on, passing data back and forth that's already been generated in your system. So, and then the third piece of that is the RIN verification. So we will have a read-only access to EMTS transactions as a QAP provider, and we basically combine those things, do analysis according to the QAP rules. If there is any remediation that ever needs to be done, that's a collaborative process between Genscape and the producer, and we work together on those things. Typically an example of something that we might find is, let's say, a temperature correction goes errant or something like that. Those are the typical types of things that we work with producers to help get back in sync with. Then we display the results. Once the QRIN designation is available to us in EMTS, that will be part of it. We will continue to display both the ARIN and BRIN interim status or the QRIN status once that's available on the Genscape dashboard. And just kind of walking you through what to expect when you sign up. So sign up an MSA, Genscape QAP will provide you checklists and workflow. Then let's go through the onboarding piece, and then we'll go through the ongoing piece. We'll do scheduling of RIN training and the first site audit. We'll also get you initialized on the Genscape dashboard and the CDX. Then we'll complete optional RIN training. We do RIN generation training as well if that's desired. We'll acquire a quality sample and complete the site audit. So then basically we analyze all that information and help the producer through any remediation that's necessary. And then basically that part of the audit would be passed. We also, in the meantime, collect basically an onboarding set of information, complete a document review, combine that with the results of the site review, and then you become verified on the Genscape dashboard and an EMTS. For the ongoing part, we offer a remote monitoring option, so we'll submit that remote monitoring plan to the producer and get the monitoring equipment installed along with any connections that's necessary with the plant data integration. We'll also obtain read-only access to EMTS as part of that process in CDX, and then collect the ongoing documentation that's necessary, and then the ongoing QAP process just continues from there. You'll get a copy of these slides. We really just wanted to include a typical onboarding documentation set so that if you're thinking about QAP or know that you're going to do this, then you can get these documents prepared and begin to prepare yourself for going through the QAP onboarding process. Also some site visit expectations, what typically happens. I don't think that if any of the facilities that are online today have been through a site visit for an RFS2 engineering review or a sustainability review, it's not a lot different than that. So basically, it's a walkthrough of the facility. There are photographs and notes taken about key processing equipment, interviews with key personnel, questions about processing. Some documentation tends to be reviewed on site for client convenience, or if a client has a proprietary document that they don't want to push out, even though there is a very strict confidentiality policy for between our QAP provisions and our QAP clients. Some of those things would just rather stay in-house, and we certainly do that on many cases for client convenience. So collect a fuel sample. We also look at the transportation, delivery, and sourcing. And then again, with the site visit, if you're selecting a remote monitoring option, then that plan will be discussed with the staff. Also, these are typical quarterly documentation submissions. I'm not going to go through these in too much detail right now, but please, if it's the hope was that it would be helpful to you if you're preparing for QAP, so that you can start preparing these as part of your workflow process. As part of our QAP services, we also, we offer everything that's required for the QAP. There's nothing extra in there, so all of the sampling and the lab costs for the sample, all that's included, as well as the remote monitoring, the equipment, and the visits. All of that stuff is part of the QAP package. In addition, we also will do the triennial engineering review or registration engineering review alongside the QAP visit, so long as they can be performed at the same time. And then also, we do quarterly report filing. That's an option. You certainly don't have to do that as part of our QAP program, but we're already getting a lot of this data, so that's something that we provide to our clients. The other thing I just want to point out is that we spend a lot of time answering compliance questions and things like that with our clients, and that's just part of what we do. So that service is included as part of our general QAP client program. So, I'll just point out a couple of advantages that we feel like we offer as a QAP provider. One of the things is that we have a web-based dashboard for data drop-off and client promotion. We have the remote monitoring option that can replace the second annual site visit and also helps enable multiple compliance needs at once. We talked a little bit about, our on-demand type compliance services that we have for our clients. We also can connect with existing in-plant monitoring systems to try to streamline compliance data transfer. One of the things that we also can do is provide customized services packages with market information, so that if you're interested in getting insight that we show to ethanol inventories at trading hubs, let's say, or you want corn forecasting with Stefan and his team, we can offer those things together with QAP, and I think we can offer a very valuable package. And we've done so in the past, to facilities that are looking for these multiple types of information. So we also, for instance, through one of our business associates, have special attestation pricing. So if you're a Genscape QAP client, then you have eligibility for that special attestation pricing. And additionally, things that we can do while we're doing the QAP include LCFS integrity programs and sustainability credentials. Okay, so we're going to switch gears. We wanted to go through the QAP and talk about that and how it relates to ethanol in terms of the implementation. And now we'd like to switch over and start talking about supply statistics and trends. So what we're going to talk about here in the supply statistics and trends is, this isn't intended to give kind of a complete picture or even necessarily what I would call a forecast. But what this is intended to do is to show, first of all, the total D6 RIN generation to date and what the volume trajectory looks like for the rest of the year, what the export corrected production looks like, and how that compares to the proposed RVO. Then we'll also talk about the import and export picture, and then what would be potential influences on exports, and then a little bit about how the advanced biofuels pool is shaping up. Although not directly related to necessarily ethanol, it is part of the bigger picture of RFS. So what you're looking at is a bar chart by month of 4 different years of ethanol production. So the ones that are kind of the muted colors, the purple, green, and red, are from 2011 through 2013. And what this represents is raw D6 RINs generated as a percent of the RVO. So this data comes from the EMTS. This is D6 generation data used for analysis. It's raw, so this isn't export corrected or corrected for any event. So basically, with the annual ethanol RVOs are used as a percentage basis for 2011 through 2013. And then the proposed RVO, although we don't have a final RVO yet for any of the renewable fuels for 2014, we use that as a percentage basis for 2014. So the concept behind this plot was basically to say, you know, although the past is not necessarily a predictor of the future, what does this year look like compared to past years? So, I mean, I think that you can see that this year seems to look something like 2011. Anecdotally, so we would be on pace for production years similar to that in terms of, you know, percentage of RVO. And this year we would actually, you know, the blue bar shows what we're doing this year. So the data is presented through August 2014, which is the latest that was available through EMTS. So as of August 2014, the ethanol industry has achieved 73% of what the proposed RVO was, which was 13.0 billion for 2014. So if you use just a linear direct trajectory, and this is not doing any modeling of influential factors that may happen on the future, it's just a direct linear trajectory based on the mid-year trajectory, that imports certainly seem down, and net exports are up from last year, since we're just a little over midway through the year in this plot. But there's something important to consider. There can be bursts of imports at the end of the year. So what's shown in this plot, the green shows each of those years, 2010 through 2014, the year-to-date as of July, and then the red bar shows the whole year. So you can see that in 2011 and 2012, there was a larger proportion of imports towards the end of the year. That's not always the case. In 2013 and 2010, we certainly didn't see that. But based on the strict trajectory, the import picture definitely seems lower this year than previous years. If we look at the imports according to the EIA weekly data, there have been no imports that have been reported for the weeks ending August 8th through October 3rd. So there hasn't been an indication of a late burst of import yet. In terms of scenarios that might have impacts, in September, Brazil expanded its tax credit for domestic ethanol exporters. So they have a tax credit that's worth 0.3% of the value of its exports, and that's set to actually increase to 3% in 2015. So against each of these bullet points, we've just taken an arrow. If the arrow is pointing up and it's green, it's a positive, it should say import influence indicator there. So it would basically say that would be something that would cause more imports to come into the United States. If it's a red arrow pointing down, then it basically would say that's something that would be a detractor for more imports coming into the United States. So we looked at the previous slide that showed that the EIA weekly data has not shown imports for several weeks. Another factor is that there was an increase in the upper limit on domestic anhydrous blending in Brazil that went up from 25% to 27.5%. That's also been passed, so that could be looked at as something that would not bring in more ethanol imports in the United States from Brazil. this one is a flat arrow. It's not either up or down. So U.S. ethanol prices have been lower of late, but also the anhydrous cash prices in Brazil have also fallen in the last month, according to this EPA there. So both of those factors, both of those prices have fallen. So really, one over the other really doesn't have an advantage. And quickly, I'm going to go through here some of the stuff that regards the advanced fuels. Again, I know that really wanted to focus more on the pieces that were ethanol related, but I thought it would be good here to kind of to complete the picture to look at some of the advanced things. So we talked about imports, and imports not likely being as high as they were in previous years. Imports typically contribute to the D5 contribution mix. In the last 3 years, they've actually been the largest contributor to the D5 mix, and that's a lot of the advanced RINs that aren't biomass-based diesel. In 2010, there was more of a mix between different things, but as the EMTS, the RFS2 program started to really grow into more maturity, you started to see ethanol imports really dominate those D5 contributions, 96% in 2012, and then last year it was 82%. You see that biogas is a contributor there. Also non-ester renewable diesel. Biogas will actually, most of that, if not all of it, it's going to qualify for D3 RINs after August 2014, so that will no longer be a significant D5 contributor beginning actually in September and going forward. For biomass-based diesel, which is another part of the advanced pool, the trajectory, again, is something like 1.8 billion that's not export corrected. So this is actually the raw data, the raw D4 data. The import and exports have not been corrected in this data. But if you look at the monthly import-export picture in the lower right-hand corner here, it's really not remarkable. There's nothing that looks very different from other years. There's not quite a balance between the two, but it's not far off from that. So the trajectory shouldn't be modified dramatically from what's shown here. And again, this is just a trajectory. It's just a linear piece. So this is not taking into account large events that could happen. There's no particular adjustment for the heating oil season or anything like this. This is just if things continued on the monthly average like they have in the past. So just a quick wrap-up of these trends. Based on a simple linear trajectory, domestic production of ethanol could be just shy of 14 billion gallons. And if the exports continue at the rate that they have, then you'd be looking at a production minus exports to be somewhere around 13.2 billion gallons. The U.S. is on track, as we typically have, to continue its trend as a net exporter with little ethanol import activity so far this year. The advanced biofuel target, biodiesel, is on par to basically produce the majority of what's required for the advanced fuel target. The D5s generated that usually compose a lot of the differential between biomass-based diesel and the total advanced really have been quite small this year, a little more than 0.15 billion gallons so far this year. Biogas used to be a part of the D3 pool or D5 pool, but now will be part of the D3s going forward, and the sugarcane imports tend to be lagging so far in looking at this year versus previous years. So just a quick note that I know that there was some discussion about the biodiesel RIN carryover from 2013, and that may also account for some of the advanced volumes that will be required once we have an RVO in 2014. Just some quick notes on the cellulosic outlook. So cellulosic biofuel is actually beginning to take off in 2014. The volumes won't be such that it'll affect the advanced volume in a great way, but it's certainly worth mentioning that this is an accelerating industry that's going to have an impact as time continues. So you have 4 major U.S. cellulosic ethanol facilities that have entered the marketplace this year. The current active cellulosic facilities that are producing would have the potential to produce 9 million gallons in 2014 if they are producing at capacity. So that's the potential. If all 4 facilities are producing at capacity next year, then we'd be looking at the potential for about 91 million gallons. So my colleague Sylvia Zhang and I produced this outlook on 2014 production. For more info, please feel free to download this complimentary white paper at the link that's shown here. Also, something that we talked about in the white paper was biomethane. So several biogas pathways now count for cellulosic biofuel production with the passage of the Pathways 2 final rule in July of 2014. So these pathways Now from landfill gas to anaerobic digester gas to LNG and CNG applications for transportation now qualify to generate D3 RINs, so long as all the other RFS2 regulations are met. So based on the writing of the white paper, there were 27 biomethane facilities that were registered under RFS2. The current active biomethane facilities, based on Genscape estimates, have a production potential of about 67.5 million ethanol equivalent gallons in 2014, so that would be D3 RINs if they're producing at capacity. If they were to continue, and this doesn't account for any expansion or contraction of the number of facilities producing, but if that were to continue into 2015 and they were to all produce at their capacity, then you'd have 162 million ethanol equivalent gallons. So not a lot of data yet on how the industry is actually performing, but we did get one data point in EMTS data for August 2014. Cellulosic biofuel, there was about 3.6 million or 3.5 million cellulosic RINs that were generated in August 2014. The pathway just became effective August 18th. So if the RINs were only generated, if you could look at this and say, if the RINs were only generated for gas flowing on or after August 18th, then this equivocates to 250,000 RINs per day. So the total production based on 250,000 RINs a day would be about 30 million biomethane-based D3 RINs in 2014 if that daily rate persists. That's a big assumption based on one data point, but it just gives an idea of what the industry might do for the remainder of the year. There's a number of factors that play into this. What was the ramp rate? How many of those registered facilities were actually ramped up? A lot of that's unknown, but just looking at the simple statistics, that's a data point to consider. So Stefan, one of the things that I didn't ask you about before we get on to the growing season update is that I know you had written an article about corn kernel fiber and kind of the importance of that to the renewable fuel standard. Would you want to just talk a little bit about that and kind of where you think that might be heading?
Yeah, so we are seeing that corn kernel fiber to ethanol is quickly emerging as a potential feedstock for additional cellulosic RINs at cornstarch ethanol plants, primarily driven by advances in enzyme technology. We've been following this technology for about 4 years, looking at technologies developed at Purdue and ICM at the National Corn to Ethanol Research Center, and we feel the time is right. We see out there the time is right. Gwinnett County Corn Processors has installed this technology, and some experts really believe that the adoption pattern could really follow the rapid adoption pattern seen for the corn oil separation technology, where a lot of plants quickly installed this technology. And the total potential could be as high as 1 billion gallons out of the existing installed fleet of starch ethanol plants. So it's really something to keep in mind and keep watching over the next year. I think that there will be a lot of movement on that front.
Right. Great. Well, Stefan, I'll flip it over to you to talk about the growing season, and just tell me when to switch the slides, and I'll switch them for you as you go through.
Thank you. Yeah, so just switch to the next slide. Yes. So the Genscape Land Viewer platform currently predicts corn yields and corn production for the U.S. on a county-by-county basis. We rely heavily on satellite imagery and remote sensing imagery. We have a yield model that we update every 2 weeks throughout the growing season, and our assessments are really heavily corroborated by on-the-ground ground truthing. We do a crop tour every week during July, August, and September, where we have a network of 12 consultants scout the area, scout several county-wide area, and report on the exact growing conditions for that county, for these counties, and that goes into our yield model. Currently, our yield model predicts yields of 173.9 bushels per acre and national bushels of 14.6 billion. I will go into more detail on that. We see really some record yields across Illinois. We see overall very favorable growing conditions still out there. Going into harvest, it'll be hit or miss with rain. Rain could cause a little bit of a delay. but the bigger issue to watch here are really transportation and storage logistics, and I will get into this a little bit. There's areas that are severely short on grain storage this year, and that's going to be a problem, especially for areas that are also transportation constrained. Can you go to the next slide, please? So these are our predictions for the main states. You can see Iowa very high, 187. Illinois very high, 199. Very solid yield contributions. And you can see how this all adds up for us at 14.6 billion bushels of total production on 83.9 million acres. We still think we're a little bit higher on the acreage side that we're seeing out there, but we're coming in at 14.6 billion bushels. There's a lot of analysts are currently increasing their yield predictions to 178 bushels per acre. We think that's probably a little bit high. That's a little sort of an over exuberance out there among analysts right now, but it's going to be a record production for sure. Next slide, please.
Stephen, not to be pedantic, but this is for corn, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
So this is how we've done so far this season. In August, USDA came out with 167.4. That was low, right? Admittedly low by USDA. They have since increased their yield numbers in August. We predicted that USDA would be low. We had a more favorable view of yields at 173, and then we saw eye to eye in our September forecast. We very closely matched USDA's number ahead of their report, and we will see the new USDA number coming out tomorrow. We expect them to adjust their numbers somewhat slightly upwards, and we are in line with that as well, as you can see from our projection of 173.9 going forward. Next slide, please. How does this work across the area? As I told you, we have a county-by-county model that allows us to identify for our clients corn available in their immediate corn draw area, but it also allows us to give sort of a high-resolution national picture. Again, Illinois, one of the hotspots of really, really solid yields, as well as Iowa, Minnesota. We see really, really strong yields across all states. Last year, when we looked at this picture, there were some weak spots across the southern Minnesota, northern Iowa area that we identified. This year we've seen really quite a solid picture all across. Next slide, please. Again, so this shows the production numbers by county, the total expected production numbers by county. That allows us, I will go in some later slides a little bit into transportation logistics. It allows us to address that issue in more detail, how much corn we have coming in on a regional basis really affects our constraints, our storage capacity this year. But you can see all states are above average in the production as well, meaning acreage multiplied by yield in the production. Only on the eastern states there may be some lower than expected production numbers coming in, or slightly lower than average production numbers coming in, but the strong corn states are well above average. Next slide, please. Rain events, throughout this harvesting season, as usual, may impact and are impacting the harvesting progress. The challenge will be to bring in this record crop. There's a lot of acres to be harvested, and so we are tracking the weather very closely here going forward. There's been greater than 5 inches in western Illinois and Missouri of late. That did impact some of the harvesting, nothing of great concern yet, but something that needs to be tracked. Next slide, please. Well, like I said, continued rains in Missouri may slow finishing harvesting here, something we track pretty closely, but in many areas across the Midwest, we have been so far okay to get some of the early harvesting. Next slide. So this shows the crop progress as it's moving up from the southern states into those physiological maturity. The Dakotas, Minnesota, and Wisconsin still need some warm temperatures to finish this crop. We're not quite there yet. There's still a little bit of rest risk on this crop, and we need to monitor this closely as well. Next slide. So when I said there was a little bit of risk on that crop, we don't like to see per se that we see below average temperatures in Minnesota, Wisconsin right now. I still think we'll get there. Again, we need to still look at that. So these three states, Minnesota, Wisconsin, northern Iowa, we still need to look at those. Next slide, please. If you go to our dashboard, our land viewer dashboard, it's got a really nice pricing map in there. We basically can access pricing for all elevators and crop buyers across the Corn Belt, and you see all of our thousands of pricing points they're vetted. It's very accurate data. As many of our ethanol clients and elevator clients have testified. And you can see the prices in green reflect less expensive corn. You can see in the Dakotas, less expensive corn. Western Kansas, on the other hand, more expensive corn. But in the Dakotas, corn is really around the 220 to 40s per bushel, and then in Western Kansas, $3.20 per bushel. You can click actually on our dashboard. You can click on each of these elevators to get the cash price, the basis price, the basis spread, the location, and the name of each of those elevators. It's a really nice pricing map as you zoom in. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit of the concern that I've pointed out earlier, and that is storage and logistics. We all know, I've read about the severe train shortages this year. We've all read that there's problems getting the old crop out of areas, out of bins, and located in areas where there are transportation constraints. And what we've done here is we basically summed up this year's projected corn harvest, added in the 5-year average soy and wheat harvest, and compared it to the available storage that we got from the USDA 2012 census. So on this map, you can see areas in blue will be severely storage constrained, right? So we see northern and central Illinois will have severe shortage on storage. Iowa is almost cut in half, with the eastern part of Iowa being in a little bit better shape storage-wise than the western part of Iowa. And then South Dakota, the eastern part of South Dakota, being constrained storage-wise. So that is a little bit of a concern right now, is finding enough room to store the crop, especially in light of the prevailing prices. A lot of growers want to store their crop, but we still have a lot of older crop still in the bins that we need to sell off. Supporting that issue out, and we'll keep that tracking closely. With that, I think I'm done, and I'll hand it back to Susan.
Thanks, Stefan. So it looked like the kind of the northern part of Illinois was carrying the lower part of Illinois in terms of those large yields. So the northern Illinois yields must be really exceptional this year.
They're really exceptional. We're hearing of fields, many fields. I talked to a grower just yesterday. Across his fields, he sees yields of 240 bushels per acre. Really record yields.
Yeah, that's pretty spectacular. Wow.
Yeah.
Stephanie, I just wanted to make sure that everybody in the call, we have a dashboard that's available that's complimentary to the public. All you need to do is register, and you can access the price mask that Stefan was talking about, and some pretty cool mapping and analytical tools. We also have a subscription service. Stefan and his team provide very detailed and very focused local risk management services via crop production throughout the harvest season as a subscription service, but anyone in the industry and in the community can come and create a login here and take a look at some of these maps. So it just depends on where you get the most value out of these things. But basically, if you go to the LandViewer website, we have a side-by-side link mapping, so you can hold on to one side of this and it drags the other one, and then you can put different mapping layers on each one of those things. So you can select the reference map, you can look at the precip, temperature, vegetation, soil moisture, and then you can actually overlay basis prices onto those base maps and kind of take a look at those things side by side. So for instance, here's a snapshot I took on the left-hand side. We're looking from the precip change from normal for the last 30 days, and then looking on the corn growth map earlier this year on how those stages were moving north, and comparing that to the precip map. So that's an example, and here's the pricing. It's actually shown on both sides here, but clicked on a place close to Kentucky here at Owensboro grain. You can see what the price and the basis was, and so you get this updated. It's updated overnight every 24 hours, so you can see these basis prices on a daily basis. Stefan, you might want to just talk a little bit about where these come from. I know we get them from GeoGrain via the CBOT.
Yeah, so we looked at several groups really look at and accumulate pricing data from elevators. We have a cooperation in place with a company called GeoGrain. We feel they do a very thorough job of vetting all this data and quality controlling the data, and by us showing this data to our clients, getting feedback from our clients, we learned it's really very accurate. I have not heard from anybody that we had a major discrepancy posted. For example, any ethanol plant saying, no, this is not really the price we're bidding at this point. So it's accurate data. Be sorted and provide an additional indication, where the basis, where the cash price differs from the CBOT price, and we flag those in colors on this pricing mask. And again, as Susan pointed out, you can get all these data points once you click on the individual data points.
Great. Another thing that we provide is analysis and commentary. So we actually have, we have a weekly update on the area crop conditions, like Stefan was saying, and you can use the dashboard to access weekly updates on crop conditions. We have 12 independent crop consultants that comment on different areas of the country, highlighted there in the circles, and they provide photos and expert commentary on what's going on in the crop development and diseases, pests, things like that they actually see with the boots on the ground. So you can, when you get the slides, feel free to click here and get your free account. Also, we offer premium subscriptions that have localized crop production risk management tools available that are more advanced for ethanol facilities, grain elevators, grain buyers, and grain traders. But please feel free to use this industry service on the LandViewer dashboard. I mentioned earlier that if you decide to go with QAP, that we have, packages of industry information that can go along with that as a complete compliance and information solution. This shows an example of our ethanol production monitor, a snapshot of that, where you can actually see nat gas nominations for about 70 locations in the ethanol industry. We show outage events and also a daily update and history of ramp up and ramp down events back to August 2013. So. And then we also provide ethanol inventory reports. Right now we have the New York Harbor storage region for ethanol. We use our proprietary technology to actually measure the liquid in storage, and then basically on a week-by-week basis break this down on a field-by-field point. So you can see an example with some of the data blocked out there on the right-hand side of the New York Harbor ethanol inventory report. We're also preparing to launch other regions. We're looking at the Gulf Coast right now and plan to have that in development in a beta form, hopefully by the end of the year, and then also Chicago storage, including Argo, somewhere around September of 2015. So yeah, so that's just something we wanted to point out. So again, Steph and I are just really glad that you joined us today, and hope you've got something out of our presentation today. Certainly, we welcome your follow-up calls. And we did have one question today, so I'll go ahead and address that question. If you have any more questions, feel free to fire away. We'll probably conclude this no later than 10 after, but feel free, like I said, to shoot out any questions for Stefan or me. So the question was, is since QAP is voluntary, what are your expectations of ethanol producers signing up for QAP? The fraudulent RINs were created in the biodiesel industry. That is the question about QAP that's relevant to the audience today. I think that to answer that question, what I can say without talking in too many specifics to guard the confidentiality of our clients, but what I can say is that we have a substantial amount of our client base that is ethanol, and that is corn-based ethanol, and so we've seen a lot more. I think what's driving that really is the affirmative defense. I think that depending on the risk tolerance of the counterparties, some counterparties really just want that affirmative defense for every type of RIN, and I think that they think that it's kind of a small price to pay for that level of comfort and managing the risk. So I think that's really driving it. And if you kind of look at the supply and demand relationships, there are probably around 200, I would say, producing ethanol plants right now in the United States, somewhere around that number. Stefan, you can correct me if I'm wrong there. Is that pretty well on the mark?
Yeah, that's right.
So that, I think that if you look at the relationship there's probably a pretty good diversification among the buyers on who they buy from, so that they're not just buying from one supplier, hypothetically. So if you have one buyer that's driving a QAP for all their suppliers, then that can cover a lot of the market in a hurry. So I think that, again, I think it's being driven by the buyer, and I think it's the affirmative defense that's attractive to that buyer, and I think that's why we see a diverse client base from biodiesel to ethanol to renewable diesel to cellulosic, and that's I do think that we've seen a lot more adoption. Our client base has doubled since the final rule, and that's definitely made a big difference in the acceptance of the QAP as the real deal in terms of affirmative defense. So really, we haven't seen any other questions come through. Stefan, one other thing I noticed in your map of the storage and transportation capacity, that seems like a pretty unique thing, and I also noticed it looked like Nebraska also was in one of those state categories that had a lack of storage compared, or not a lack, but may have been stretched thin in terms of transportation and storage with respect to the yields there.
Yeah, certainly. Again, it's also the interaction between transportation and available storage, right? Whereas, for example, Western Minnesota might look, slightly better on storage availability, but there are going to be some severe transportation constraints to get the old crop out of the bins right now, especially right now in tightness in trains. So, again, I think the picture looks critical, right? Even in areas where the transportation, that are not blue, in our map, one still has to keep in mind there might be transportation constraints. So yeah, it's certainly an interaction, but logistics will be a big issue for this crop, that's for sure.
Sure, it makes sense. Is this the largest harvest that's expected on record on an annual basis, or have there been larger harvests expected?
No, this is going to be the largest harvest.
All right. Wow. So it's a big year. Well, yeah, I think Stefan, that's it. We didn't have a lot of any other questions on the books here. Any final closing comments for our audience today?
No, I think it's going to be, in general, I think it's going to be a really good year for ethanol production with lower priced corn available, right? And very good financial year for ethanol plants, and I think it'll strengthen the ethanol industry tremendously with influx of money going into this plant. And we are obviously all big supporters of the industry and have been for years, and so I think that is good news.
Wow, well said, well said. Well, on that note, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody that joined Stefan and me today, and we appreciate you attending the webinar. The slides will be sent out after the webinar, so you'll get a copy of those. And like I said, please feel free to reach out to us if you're interested in QAP, if you're interested in signing up for the Land Viewer dashboard, please do that, and any of our other services, contact Stefan or myself. So have a wonderful rest of the day, and we look forward to talking with you again soon.